In this video I'm going to try and talk you through the basic interface of Blender and talk about my workflow through retopologizing a sculpt made in Sculptress and creating a rig, and if there is time, animations. I'm going to do it as quickly as possible and mention the hotkeys as I use them. This is the scene you will most likely see when you first open up Blender. A few things you should know about the interface is that depending on which of the windows, there are 4 open by default, that your mouse is over, that is the selected window. Any hotkeys you press will be relative to that window, and you can quite easily change the layout by pulling things around, and be careful not to hide the menu bars, but it's quite easy to change that back. And you can also pull out more windows from these tabs in the corner if you need to. And I believe it's right click or just right click and join area on the corner tabs to join the areas back together. An important difference between Blender and a lot of other programs is Blender uses right click to select different objects, as you can see highlighted in orange, rather than left click, which moves the 3D cursor. 3D cursor is used for some functions and also might be used for rotation or something if you want, or other special tools in Blender. For game development, what I use Blender for into Unity, I don't need these things. I think that's a light and a camera, so I can select those by pressing B and then left click and drag to create a marquee over them and select both. Then I can press X and select delete to delete them. And another thing that's very important to know about Blender's interface, in the 3D viewport there are different modes which you can change here. Currently I'm in object mode, which allows you to select and move and rotate and scale objects, but only objects themselves, and you cannot do any editing in this. It's good to use for animation and just setting up your scene and keeping things tidy, but you don't use it very much for actually modelling. I am going to select the object, which is that, and open up the mode menu, and I have object mode, edit mode, which is used for editing the object and doing any extruding or pulling vertexes around. There is sculpt mode, which is Blender's sculpting tools. Vertex paint for, I don't know what this is for. I've only been using Blender for around 9 months. Texture paint, which is for painting your textures onto Blender, and weight paint for painting the weights when rigging. One more important thing to note about Blender is whenever you create an object, if I press Shift and A, I open up the Add Mesh menu and I can select an object. Let's select a cube, and it's added another cube in exactly the same place. Oh no, it hasn't, it's over here, but I've got the manipulator there and it's automatically put me in that mode. If I press Escape, it doesn't cancel. This is important to note, because when you are editing, if I go into face select mode here, you can see vertex, edge and face select mode, and if I press E to extrude that, it automatically puts me in grab mode, so I can move this extrusion around. So when I press escape, the extrusion goes back to its default position, but it's still got the extruded faces and vertexes there. I have to Control Z to get rid of the actual extrusion itself. Right, just to talk you through the interface and where things are, you have the file menu at the top, you have a new, open, very useful, open recent, save as, link and append is how you connect 2 Blender files together and open one Blender scene in another Blender scene. This takes you into directory view and you go through it and select exactly which part of the scene you want to import. I believe the difference is link merges the two files together and append copies the information from one file to another, but you should research this yourself as I don't use these functions very much and I'm not sure. Import for importing file types, most commonly I use wavefront OBJ, importing from Sculptress. Export is more or less the same, but you have Autodesk FBX file type as well for exporting files with animations or multiple UV maps to other programs. For me it's Unity. An important thing that's used in most of the windows in Blender is the N to open up an options menu which you can scroll through, and a lot of important options are put here, like viewing options such as you can have view for the normals and turn it on and change the size of the line indicating which way the normals are facing. And you can change it to display vertex normals as well, but I don't really need that at the moment. Here you have your tools, and this will be the current tool you're using and any options. So if I subdivide, I get the number of cuts, and all these tools here will give you different options, or if you use a hotkey for a tool, the options will be here. Important thing to know when you subdivide, if I do that and then and above, and I'm going to press 5 on the number pad to go into the orthographic view, just to make this selection a little easier. Press B for a box select, select all of the newly subdivided faces, press 5 again to go out of the orthographic view back into perspective view, and press X to delete all the selected, and I'll choose faces. Note that I was just faces and not faces only. I believe I will still have a lot of extra vertices that I don't want around the edges, so you have to be careful of that when using some of the tools like loop, cut and slide, which allows you to put in a edge loop when you select a face. But, it's struggling to work at the moment. You have to get it at the right point on the object, and it gives you the option of a loop. You can click it and then you can drag it around. Again, that is it going straight into the movement tool, so escape to cancel the current tool won't cancel the loop, cut and slide. And generally when I use this, at least I go around and delete extra faces afterwards, and it's not ideal for my uses in retopology. Now I'm going to go over to a new file, just delete everything there, file, import wavefront OBJ. I'm going to import a file that I made earlier. Here we have it. It's a simple bird shape. And this is what I'm going to try and retopologize. To save time, I'm just going to retopologize the head independently, as it's quite intricate and it'll take me a while, and then talk you through the tools and retopologizing the rest. Alright, here I've just started the retopo. I just started with a cube, I deleted one of the faces and extruded up along the beak. I did some messing around here, extruded down here, and I ended up with 8 faces coming out here, the head, to join the body. And that was just a bit complicated and time consuming, creating extra faces for the eyes to add more detail later, so I cut that bit out. One thing I will show you though, which you'll probably end up doing a lot, is I can select a vertex, I'll press period or delete on the number pad to focus on it. Just makes it a little easier for me to select. Shift select with shift and right click the 4 vertices there. I'll press Alt M and that will open up the merge menu and say at center, just to give it a point to the beak there. And let's move some of my vertexes just out of where I want them to be, but I can easily fix that by pressing Z to go in wireframe view, selecting the vertexes which have gone inside. Z again to toggle off wireframe view, S and X to scale on the X axis, and just scale them out a bit. Now I'll just grab the manipulator to pull them out. The reason I'm doing this is because I'm going to use this bounding box that I'm creating, and each vertex will be pulled to the nearest point on the original sculpt, and that will retopologize it for me. I should do the same in this section of the beak too. So just select all 4 vertices, Alt M at center, and move that to the place I want it to be. Now, part of the reason of the retopology is to get the poly count down, but another reason is to create as many quads as possible along the mesh so it moves and deforms well when it's animated. I'm going to Alt select all of the edges along here, press E to extrude, and get the neck and scale that up a bit. Now before going any further, right, there are quite a lot of things about the interface in here and these other windows that I haven't explained yet, so I'm going to go through that very briefly on everything that I know about. So you have 4 windows, and you can change the window in the corner, bottom left corner for your left 2 windows, and top left corner for your right 2 windows. And you have all sorts of options, but I only ever really use a few of them. An important one that I don't choose very often would be properties. Oh no. But that is over here. You get a better view of it if you make one of the large windows. Here's the timeline. You also have a dope sheet, and that is used for animation editing. Here you have an option, very much like object mode and edit mode, to change from the dope sheet to the action editor. Actions are a way of storing animations separately in a Blender file, and this can be read in an FBX file from Unity. And here, the properties, you have render properties where you can set the frame rate and other render options. I don't use this very much because I export everything into Unity. Some scene options, world options which I won't colour, objects options for your currently selected object, constraints used for rigging and other intricate things, or labelling things or making them easy to handle for other people. Modifiers are complex functions in Blender, such as shrink wrap, which I'm going to use for this retopology, mirror, which you can use to mirror something along an axis, but I don't use these very much and I won't be covering them in great detail. Object data, you use this mostly for looking at vertex groups and when rigging, assigning weights. Your material options and texture options, I won't be covering them. Yes, there's also the UV image editor, which is options down here. You can press T to hide and show the toolbar, and N for this menu. Don't forget that works in many different windows. Going back to the retopology then. I will quickly extrude a cylindrical 10-sided object, I think it's 10 sides, down here into the tail, and then I'll extrude the wings separately after. So E to extrude, and I'm going to ignore the fact that it's intersecting with the wings, move it down, getting it close to the edges as possible, move this bottom face down. One more thing about Blender is it uses a different axis to a lot of other programs such as Maya and Unity, where Y is forward, Z is up, and X is sideways. I think you should experiment importing things into other software that you're using, because Y may not be forward, it could be backwards in it, or it might just import it with it facing upwards. But you can easily rotate things afterwards if you need to. Right. I'll Alt select to get the edge loop again, and I'll scale it along X, so make it a little wider. Press E to extrude. I'm going to Control Z to cancel that. I'm just going to move it around to confirm it got rid of the extruded part, and Control Z to cancel that movement. E to extrude again, press Y to lock it to the Y axis, and check how it is down here. I think I want to move these in as much as I can afford to. I'll select the edge loop once more. E to extrude. I don't need very high poly at all for this model. It's best to keep it locked to the Y axis so it doesn't move. Because Blender uses different modes and I'm in edit mode, I can't select any other object apart from the one I selected when I pressed tab to go into edit mode. So when I press Z to go into wireframe, it ignores all 62,310 vertices on the sculpt that I'm trying to reduce, and just allows me to select this one object. Go into vertex mode, I can pull around vertexes and get it to line up better. I'll select the edge loop. Just find this top edge, move that up, go back into solid shaded view by pressing Z. And this is very, very messy and it won't work effectively, so I really need to tidy this up. But doing this quickly will suffice. Control Z to undo my mistake by selecting the wrong vertex. And I really need this to change the general shape to better fit the object. And that should do it. Actually a little low still. S and X to scale on the X axis, and just go to widen out, and then go back to edge select mode by clicking on the icons down here. Alt select the edge and extrude it one more time. And now I need it to get wider again, so scale X and split these 4 prongs on the tail, and that'll be quite complicated. What I'm going to do is select the top and bottom edges only and extrude those along the y-axis by pressing EY, and then scale them by pressing S and then Z to lock them on the Z-axis to go down, and this top one SX to scale down like that. Now I'm going to select both edges and press F to join the faces together and scale that face down. And this gives me a nice simple shape which I can extrude 2 new parts from and still keep 2 mostly quads, if not entirely quads. Although I have more edges here that I need to deal with it in some way or another. I'll leave it there while I clean this part of the mesh up.